To prevent something like the Holocaust from happening again, we need to learn why it happened in the first place and why people fell for the rhetoric. And that is the purpose of this video. Today, we're going to take a look at Nazi anti-Semitic propaganda, learn why it shows what it shows, and why it says what it says, and educate ourselves so we don't fall for something similar in the future. And just in case it wasn't clear by that introduction, no, I'm not a Nazi or an anti-Semite or a fascist or anything similar. Yes, I will be explaining their point of view and quoting their language to convey that information, but that doesn't mean that I somehow agree with them. It just means I'm educated on the topic, and I have to point this out because we live in clown world, and some people jump to stupid conclusions. Anyway, I think the propaganda posters of the National Socialists are not only revealing, but they go hand in hand with what Hitler was saying in Mein Kampf and in his speeches. So let's dive in. Starting with this first one, the red writing says, "The Eternal Jew." It's from 1938, and it shows a Jewish person holding a map of the Soviet Union and some gold coins. Some have suggested that he's begging, but he's not begging. When you beg, you hold out an empty hand, and his hand is full. Others have suggested that he might be stealing off Germany's wealth, but again, it doesn't look like he's doing any stealing. He's actually just holding out some gold coins, as if he's receiving them from you. And this is important because the National Socialists are implying that this Jewish person has received gold coins off you. Probably in exchange for something he has sold to you. A bit like this guy. Now, there's a presentation that's on a site called Slide Player, where I'm getting some of these pictures from, and they've already done the translations from the German, so that's very convenient. I'll leave a link below to the site because there's more in the presentation than I'm showing here, so you might want to check it out. All my sources will be listed below as well. And they're getting these pictures from a Nazi children's book called The Poisonous Mushroom. In this slide, the Jewish person says, "Farming woman, have I got something special for you today? Look at this material. You can make a dress from it that will make you look like a baroness, like a countess, like a queen." And what you have is a Jewish businessman, obviously portrayed as being sickly and dirty, which goes in alignment with the National Socialist idea that the Jews were a disease. And this Jewish businessman is trying to sell a red cloth to a stereotypical blonde-haired Aryan Super Saiyan, who is shown as clean and healthy, as well as Christian, indicated by the cross in the background. If we go back to the previous picture, the Jewish person there was receiving gold coins in exchange for something he's given to you. And in this new picture, the Jewish businessman is trying to sell the red cloth in exchange for what? Money. So in both pictures, yeah, we have a connection with disease and sickliness, but we also have a connection with money. In this one, we have two Jews talking to one another. The first says, "Well, colleague Morgenthau, we did a good piece of business today." The second one responds, "Splendid, colleague Silberstein. We took the lovely money from the two Goy women and can put it in our own pockets." For those of you who aren't aware, Goy is a Jewish slur word meaning that someone is non-Jewish and also a Gentile, which in this context means heathen. The point though is that, once again, there's a connection with money, and it's probably not a coincidence that one of them, Silberstein, has the German word for silver in his name. But think about it. We've done some business and we've taken the lovely money from the women and put it in our own pockets. So they've sold something to the women, and it's implied that the women have been tricked by the Jews into parting with their money. And that all the Jews care about is tricking you to take your money off you and put it in their pockets. So there's a definite connection with business and money. Which ties directly into this one. The caption reads, "The God of the Jews is money. To earn money, he commits the greatest crimes. He will not rest until he can sit on a huge money sack, until he has become the king of money. So the word Börse means stock exchange in German. So this Jewish person is at the stock exchange along with other Jewish characters in the background. The National Socialists had this idea that the Jews ran the stock exchange, with Hitler saying exactly that in Mein Kampf, which we'll come back to. But here we have a Jewish guy in a suit, and you can tell he's Jewish because of the Star of David on his book, and he's sat on a bag of money. The word Geld means money in German, and that's why there's tons of gold coins all over the floor. You can see the crown as if he's the king of money, and on the other side, the top hat. Now, you might be thinking, this guy looks a bit sickly. But why is that? How have they managed to convey a sickliness to this guy? Is it because he's fat, or is it his nose? You know, what's going on? Well, maybe you didn't consciously notice this, but it's not a coincidence that he has green socks and purple shoes. The money is kinda green too in the middle, and the background is green with purple shades, as well as his tie, which contrasts with the green book and green suit he's wearing. Well, a good way to get you to understand this is to look at something similar. In the Warhammer universe, Nurgle is the demon plague god, and he and his followers are often shown as predominantly green with purple innards to represent their sickliness, disease, as well as pus. And the reason why is due to colour theory. This colour scheme makes you think of sickliness. Well, it's the same for the Jewish guy on the bag of gold. If you want to paint someone as being diseased, then you've got to put green with purple somewhere in the picture, and it will subconsciously imply this. Maybe consciously you didn't even notice this, but that's subconsciously what it's doing. If we go back to the previous picture with the two Jews talking to each other, notice that they're also wearing purple clothes. I know the one on the right is in red, but the coat he's wearing is purplish. And parts of them, the book or the faces or the tie, are either yellow or green. So again, it's subconsciously indicating that they're diseased. Here's the Jewish guy trying to sell the red material to the woman, and he's surrounded by green. He's got a purple tie, and his outfit is purple and green. Meanwhile, she's in blue. Yeah, she's wearing purple as well, but that blue breaks up the green from the purple, and that separation is enough to prevent you from thinking she's diseased. Another photo where the caption says, "Just look at these guys, the louse-infested beards, the filthy protruding ears." So we have lice and filth, but we also have purple guy in the middle with green guys around him. And the guy on the right has a green beard. I don't know many people with green beards. So again, it's all about disease and plague. Then we get to the actual front cover of the book itself, the poisonous mushroom. So the Jews are depicted as being a poisonous mushroom, but also a deadly disease. Again, sickly. Not too much purple in this one, but definitely an indication that they're sickly. And to me, the most obvious one is this one. 3 purple guys with 1 green Jewish guy. The whole picture is basically green and purple, with the green backgrounds, the purple hats dangling above. Now the lady is in blue, like the lady from the other one, and there's a red cloth hanging from the window, so maybe it's the same woman, but again, subconsciously, it all implies disease when it comes to the green Jew. And the Jewish guy is saying, people are always saying that we Jews cheat other people, that we lie and deceive. Not a word of it is true. We Jews are the most decent people in the world. So the Jewish guy is trying to persuade the Germans that he and the other Jews are not as bad as some have said. But with the colour scheme, the implication of disease, the way that he's hunched over and has exaggerated features, like his big nose, and the fact that he's the only man who's not clean shaven, It all indicates that he's lying when he says this, so the Nazis are implying that the opposite is true, that you shouldn't trust them, that they always cheat other people, that they lie and deceive, and that they're the worst people in the world, etc. That's what the National Socialists are implying. This one is a bit more subtle in the colour scheme. There's not as much purple here, although the roof is purple, as is the bag of sweets, but again he's got green glasses, a green hat, green scarf, green shoes. Even his hand is a yellow-green. Now, his outfit is red, but this contrasts nicely with the pure, innocent blue girl. Had he been in purple, that wouldn't have worked as well, so that's why they've chosen to use red rather than purple for his coat. But it's a dingy red, which implies bad blood. And the Jewish guy says, "Here, kids, I have some candy for you. But you both have to come with me." It should be obvious what they're implying here, so I'm not going to go into any more detail. There is going to be more pictures, but the final slide I'll take from this website shows a large Jewish person who has converted to Christianity. You can see his Bible here. Again, green and purple is in the photo, implying a sickliness, although because he's in black and in the centre, it's almost as if he's the origin and the source of the sickness. And it says, baptism didn't make a Gentile out of him. Remember before when we said that the Jewish word goy meant someone who isn't Jewish, but it also meant Gentile or heathen? Well, the National Socialists are saying that his conversion to Christianity hasn't made him a non-Jewish person. In other words, he's still a Jew, even though he's no longer practicing Judaism. It's teaching kids that it's their race that matters most, not their religion. Here's another poster. This one says that it's the Jews' fault for the war, and a massive finger is pointing at the Jew, who literally looks like the Penguin from Batman Returns. There's been accusations that the portrayal of the Penguin in the film was anti-Semitic, and I don't think that this poster helps too much with that. But the thing here is that the National Socialists are saying that it was the Jew who started the war. And what is the Jew wearing? A top hat, a black suit, and he's hunched over as if he's scheming. This one says that the Jew is a war instigator and a war prolonger. So if you want to know who's behind the war, guys, who started it and who's keeping it going, just pull back the curtain and you'll find the Jew. This other one implies the same thing. The words say, behind the enemy forces is the Jew. So behind the curtain, which is British, American and Soviet, is this Jewish guy wearing a black suit and hat. But why is he behind the war? How can the Jew be creating and prolonging the war? What are they implying is happening here? Well, this is a poster that the Nazis made for the Soviet Union. The Jewish guy is sitting on a bunch of skulls with his diseased hands playing with gold coins. But just look at this for a second. So there's red flames or steam coming from the sack itself, and from his hands rises this large smokestack. Now, maybe it's from behind him, but I don't think this is a coincidence. The implication is that the war has been started and prolonged by the Jews and their money. They've done it all for money and profit. Unfortunately, I've tried typing the words into Google Translate, but the middle word doesn't come up, so I'm not sure what the message is at the bottom. I'm sure my Russian viewers will tell us, but I think the overall message is clear, especially when we tie it with this one. Again, I can't translate this from the Russian, but I think the picture itself says enough. You've got a Red Army soldier being manipulated like a puppet by the Red Army Commissar, who's being manipulated by Stalin, who's being manipulated by the Jews. So behind the Soviet Union, behind Marxist socialism, is the Jews. But notice that the Jew isn't wearing a comrade's outfit. He's not wearing overalls or a worker's getup. He's wearing a suit and tie. He's completely different than the others in the photo. And if we think back to the other posters, this is the guy with the money. This is the guy financing the war, pulling the strings. So this poster is trying to tell the Red Army soldiers that they are, in fact, puppets of the Jews who are the ones financing everything, because they're the ones with all the money, right? This poster is called The Wire Puller, and is from 1924, really early on in the history of National Socialism. You can see the Star of David here, so we've got a big fat Jewish guy pulling the strings of the people in an industrial setting. They're the workers, and he's a big fat industrialist, and it's the industrialists like this guy who are stealing all your money, getting fat off your labour and pulling the strings. It's implying that you're the slaves of the Jews who are exploiting you. This is the real and only goal of the Bolshevik world revolution, it says. A Jewish businessman with cigars and tea. That's funny because the Bolsheviks and Marxist socialists don't look like this, right? They don't normally look like businessmen. The words at the bottom say, "The Jew, fattened with the sweat and blood of the subjugated and enslaved peoples in Moscow and New York, in London and Johannesburg, with the pleasure of a slave owner, he will ensure that the bloodlust of his henchmen destroys everything that opposes him, unless Europe is united from the North Cape to the Black Sea and from the Mediterranean to the Volga." And I think this one ties it all together quite nicely. Now, this is an Italian poster from 1944, but we've got to remember that Italy had fallen in 1943. Mussolini was deposed for a while and the Germans took over in the north. Mussolini's Italian Social Republic was formed, but Mussolini didn't really have much power. He was more of a puppet at this point, and it was the Germans who were in charge. So this really is a German propaganda poster. I don't think you'll find posters like this in Italy prior to 1943, because Mussolini had a Jewish mistress, Margherita Sarfatti, from 1913 all the way up until 1938, and 10,000 Jews were still in the Fascist Party of Italy up until 1943, and that was 1/3 of all the adult Jews in Italy. So while there were some anti-Semitic laws in Italy, the fascists weren't as anti-Semitic as the Germans were, and just wouldn't have produced posters like this. Nonetheless, this poster exists, and it clearly shows dead British soldiers on the right, with probably dead Italian soldiers on the left. The Jews are identified by the Star of David, and are all walking between the two sides, meaning they're international. They're holding bags of money, indicating that they're not on either side but are benefiting from the war. Notice that the bags of money they're holding all have dollar signs on them, even the guy with the British top hat. There's the American top hat too, but America and Wall Street was seen, especially by the Germans, to be run by Jews, who were behind everything. America was seen as Jewish. But look at what they're wearing. Top hats, black suits, white gloves and socks with black shoes, and given what we've seen so far, with sickly Jews depicted wearing top hats, scheming for money, trying to sell you things whilst pulling the strings and being behind the curtain of both the democratic West and the Marxist Socialists, who are all being financed by Jewish money, of them all wearing suits, mostly business suits I might add, the fat factory owners, and now we've got them associated with America and Wall Street, international corporations, as well as profit from the war. What is it all implying? Let's go back to this one. The God of the Jews is money. Why would they say this? Why would they say that the God of the Jews is money? Well, we need a bit of history. In the post-Roman era, the Christian Pope banned the practice of usury, and several early saints, including St. Ambrose, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, and Pope St. Leo the Great, all condemned usury during the late Roman Empire. Usury is when you lend money and charge interest. In other words, The interest payment on a loan was called usury, and that interest was banned by the church because usury was thought to be exploitative of the poor. So Christians couldn't lend money, and only non-Christians could, which is why in the West only the Jews could be the moneylenders and the money changers. They also couldn't own land in Christian Europe, so the Jews were forced to live in towns, or boroughs, which is where we get the word bourgeoisie from, meaning townfolk. Since they were also banned from working as craftsmen, in addition to being moneylenders, they became tax collectors, merchants, and also they minted coins, professions which were hated by the rest of society, especially the poor. To people without money, it may have seemed as if Jewish moneylenders did no real work, and yet were richer than their hard-working neighbours, and people who could not read nor do arithmetic no doubt suspected that they were being cheated when the moneylender told them how much interest they owed. When a Jewish moneylender demanded repayment of money he had loaned, he may have seemed to be adding to the burdens of a family that was already in deep financial trouble. People who are deeply in debt sometimes see the money they owe as a sign of failure. They feel ashamed that they were unable to manage their affairs better. Such embarrassment or shame may have led Christian borrowers to blame the lender, and this was easier when the lender was an outsider. And because they believed that charging interest for a loan was a sin, their blame was particularly intense. In many places, Jews had to live away from their Christian neighbours and wear badges on their clothes to distinguish them and warn Christians of who they were. They were blamed for wars and plagues and were seen as apart from the rest of society. And being apart from society, they were seen as international. And another word associated with Jews is cosmopolitan or cosmopolitan Jew, which means someone who is a citizen of the world, as well as other things. But it just so happened that the money lending, the banking and international trade that the Jews were most associated with ended up being the exact businesses that did extremely well during the Industrial Revolution. So, the Jews became entwined with the concept of capitalism, as well as the bourgeoisie, and greed, and so on. All this explains why there was this association between Jews and money. It is a stereotype, but it's based in history. The old-fashioned anti-Semitism forced the Jews to be moneylenders, which led non-Jews to think that all they did was pursue money. That's why the Nazis said that the god of the Jews is money. And they weren't the only ones to say this. What is the worldly cult of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly god? Money. Money is the jealous god of Israel, besides which no other god may exist. And this isn't just some random coincidence. When Jesus found it necessary, he drove those enemies of the human race out to the temple of God, because then, as always, they used religion as a means of advancing their commercial interests. Christ drove the Jewish money changers out of the temple, and that the money changers of our age enlisted on the side of tyranny happen again to be Jews is perhaps no more than a historic coincidence. Well, that's weird, isn't it? And as Karl Marx says in Das Kapital, money which circulates is capital. And those who pursue money, the Jewish god, are the capitalists, because capitalism is Judaism. Which is why so many people think that capitalists are fat, greedy people with big Jewish noses, wearing top hats and looking like pigs, stealing off your productive work, pulling the strings, eating the poor. Some have even been depicted as green, wearing purple or near purple. oh no, don't listen to them because they're deceptive and trying to trick you. They're a poison, you know, like a mushroom that's destroying the planet, right? You know, that whole, since the 1800s, since the rise of capitalism, human activities have been the main driver of climate change. Oh, the Jews are polluting the planet, are they? Quite literally, the whole anti-capitalist narrative is wrapped up in anti-Semitism because that's where it emerged from. The development of commerce in the 18th and 19th centuries transformed the economic status of some Jews, leading to the rise of two prominent and contradictory stereotypes, that of the Jewish banker and that of the Jewish beggar. Anxiety and disgust with the cruelty of capitalism could too easily be distorted into anti-Semitism, with figures like Rothschild used as representatives of a system that ground down millions of people, not simply because they were powerful capitalists, but because they were Jewish. Some of those victims of capitalism were, of course, Jews themselves, and often economic migrants living precarious lives, but stereotypes are not rational. At the same time as Jews were being shown as grotesquely wealthy capitalist pigs, they were also being depicted as hopelessly devious beggars, leeching off society. And remember before, when we said that the Jews were seen as separate from society? Well, we discern in Judaism a universal anti-social element of the present time. So the idea came about that the rest of society as a whole, should rise up and fight back against the universal antisocial element, the capitalist Jews, the bourgeoisie. The immediate aim of the communists is the same as that of all other proletarian parties: formation of the proletariat into a class, overthrow of the bourgeois supremacy, conquest of political power by the proletariat. And Jewish money lending was to be crushed with the centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. In other words, socialism is the social control over the Jews, the capitalists. And since money was capital, and money was the jealous god of Israel, Das Kapital literally means the Jew. No wonder Goebbels declared 80 years later that all socialism is anti-Semitism. The difference, though, between Marxist socialism and National Socialism is that the Marxists were trying to replace the Jewish capitalist religion with their own religion. Thus, many Jews who were embarrassed by their heritage and who wanted to be part of the wider society, so-called self-hating Jews, abandoned their Jewish faith and became Marxists and socialists. So, in theory, Marxists only persecute the Judeo-bourgeoisie religion because they have a religious anti-Semitism, which makes sense since Marx, whose father abandoned the Jewish faith, studied Hegel, who was a Christian. National Socialists, on the other hand, see the Jews as a race. Therefore, they see capitalism as Jewish, but they also see Marxism as a Jewish plot. I began to study again, and thus it was that I first came to understand perfectly what was the substance and purpose of the life work of the Jew, Karl Marx. His Capital became intelligible to me now for the first time, and in the light of it, I now exactly understood the fight of the Social Democrats against national economics, a fight which was to prepare the ground for the hegemony of a real international and stock exchange capital. The Marxist leaders, whose business consisted in deceiving and misleading the public, naturally hated most of all a movement whose declared aim was to win over those masses which hitherto had been exclusively at the service of international Marxism in the Jewish and stock exchange parties. The title alone, German Labour Party, irritated them.
The bourgeois world is Marxist, but believes in the possibility of a certain group of people, that is to say the bourgeoisie, being able to dominate the world, while Marxism itself systematically aims at delivering the world into the hands of the Jews. The internationalization of our German economic system, that is to say, the transference of our productive forces to the control of Jewish international finance, can be completely carried out only in a state that has been politically Bolshevized. But the Marxist fighting forces commanded by international and Jewish stock exchange capital cannot finally smash the national resistance in Germany without friendly help from outside.
So Hitler thinks Marxism and capitalism are both Jewish, and that the Marxists are trying to deliver the world into the hands of the Jews. There's more reasons for this, and I've explained it before, so I'm not going to go over it here again. My point, though, is that propaganda is very subtle. It may seem obvious to us now, a long time after the events of the Second World War, to look back and think, if I was in Germany, I would never have been a Nazi. However, many of you watching this will be socialists who have never realised that socialism is fundamentally anti-Semitic. No, you might say. We just want a cashless society. Oh really? So Karl Marx thinks money is the jealous god of Israel, and you want a cashless society, do you? A Jewish-less society?
As soon as society succeeds in abolishing the empirical essence of Judaism, money, huckstering and its conditions, the Jew becomes impossible because his consciousness no longer has an object in money. The social emancipation of the Jew is the emancipation of society from Judaism.
In other words, once you get rid of money, the jealous god of Israel, and form your cashless society, the Jew becomes impossible. Karl Marx is saying here as plain as day that the end of capitalism is the end of the Jews. Socialism aims at destroying the Jews because the revolution is the final solution to the bourgeoisie question. But if you still don't believe me, read On the Jewish Question by Karl Marx because he makes it clear. And by the way, Karl Marx also says that Christianity is Judaism. So Marxism is against Christianity as well, and he says that the Christians are Jews. The reason why is because socialism is a religion, it's a cult. So it's competing with Christianity and Judaism for your soul. My advice to everyone is that you start to question the pro-socialist and anti-free market narrative that you've bought into. The free market is not as bad or evil as you've been led to believe. If you don't like money and don't work for it and hate it, then of course you're going to be poor. That's not because money is bad, it's because you've been misled. Money is not the root of all evil. The people who said it was were against the Jews, which they associated with money. And that hatred of money and the subsequent poverty you're going to suffer from if you believe this nonsense is going to drive you to the socialist religion, which promises you paradise after you die. Sorry, after the revolution. Oh, it's a religion, is it? If you want to break out of the socialist cult, be that Marxist socialism, National Socialism, Fascism, or anything else in between, I would recommend the books Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. It's an easy read, and then Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. Start there, then go on to something like Murray Rothbard's America's Great Depression, which will make you understand money unlike ever before. And then Mises's book, Socialism Kills Socialism. It's a hard read, but it totally destroys it, and you can get it for free online, links below. Now, a Nazi might be watching this and thinking that I'm just trying to trick them into believing in the Jewish religion because, capitalism is Judaism, right? Just like what Karl Marx said. After all, Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard were Jewish, right? And I've just recommended their books. Well, I would remind you Nazis of what Sun Tzu said. Know thy enemy and know thyself, and you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. So, you need to understand what free market capitalism is in order to fight it. And the best way to understand it is to read the books I just recommended. And don't forget, you guys have the magic Aryan Super Saiyan blood, so you guys are immune to Judaism anyway. So reading Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt isn't going to dilute the blood, is it? Therefore, you have no excuse.
To wrap this video up, here is a more modern propaganda piece by a neo-Nazi group. It says, "Beware the international Jew." And the message remains the same. We have a black skull indicating death with the Star of David and the Marxist symbols of the hammer and sickle. In the background there's loads of words, and it's not possible to read them all, but some of them are poverty, crime, disease, hedonism, homo intimacy, thank you YouTube for censorship, lies, white guilt, a lying press, indoctrination, mass immigration, and inflation. So basically anything that might be perceived as being bad by anyone who's ignorant of these issues is listed in the background. This implies that all poverty, all crime, all disease, all lies, all hedonism in our modern so-called capitalist society can be traced back to the Marxist capitalist Jews. It's the same message. So it's not a case of them saying this stuff back in the day, but were secretly lying about their views and they didn't really mean it, or that their views, changed. No, their views haven't changed. The message is the same. Here's another one. Two can play at this game. Death to pigs, which is similar to the pig-like capitalist depicted in socialist propaganda. And who is this guy in the middle? Phony has a $sign on him. Strange that, isn't it? It's almost as if they're anti-capitalists or something. Another one. The Aryan revolutionary rejects the morals of a sick society. His patience has its limits. His ideal will not be compromised. His life dedicated to struggle, Mein Kampf, my struggle, against a sick society, a Jewish capitalist society. This is why, if you are a socialist who hates free market capitalism because you do not understand it, you are susceptible to anti-Semitic Marxist and Nazi propaganda. This one says, the world is sick and we are the doctors. So, if the National Socialists are capitalists, then why do they think that the so-called capitalist world is sick? And the reason why is because they're not capitalists, and the ignorant masses who are pushing the idea that National Socialism is far-right capitalism, when in fact they are third positionist, all you're doing is pushing people into the hands of the Nazis. You're unwittingly helping Nazism. This is why I think it's important for me to continue to educate people about this topic to stop this process entirely, and the way to do that is for socialists of all varieties to learn how money actually works. You can do that on this channel. I'm here to help you. I'll have links on the screen now and in the description. Capitalism doesn't work the way that the socialists believe, and if you were as passionate about learning how money works as you were about your anti-capitalism, then you would never have to worry about poverty ever again. Thanks for watching, bye for now.